Hey guys, welcome to the Green Room, a special episode on kind of unpacking one of the subtopics that I shared in the message today. We talked about how not to miss the miracle.
It was so
And
good.
I think one of the greatest ways we can miss the miracle is we get into fights. We have family fights. And so I wanted to do an expanded teaching. And so today I wanted to ask Brian Lloyd and Pastor Tim to help me a little bit with this. And so in 1 Peter chapter 3, great passage for talking about conflict because Peter starts out in the uncomfortable verses where he says, husbands be like this, wives be like this, and which I just imagine he wrote that with his wife. She didn't actually see it before it went through distribution, but he does that, and then he says in verse 8 through 11, that's what I want to focus on in this teaching. He says, finally, all of you, so he's talking to families, be like-minded, sympathetic, love one another, be compassionate and humble. Do not repay evil with evil or insult with insult. On the contrary, repay evil with blessing, because to this you were called, so that you would inherit a blessing. For whoever would love life, see good days, must keep their tongue from evil and their lips from deceitful speech. They must turn from evil, do good, must seek peace, and pursue it. And so in the message today, I talked a little bit about don't let a relational fight steal your holiday light. So how do we do that? Well, some of that is diffusing tactics. And so we're going to do a little bit of talk about how to diffuse and some character qualities specifically on diffusion. And the first thing that I kind of want to point out is that if you are having a struggle, I would point out this. I used to believe when I first got married, I thought that because we had conflict, we didn't have a good marriage. And I really did. I questioned my Christianity. I questioned our relationship, and I thought, oh, well, you shouldn't fight if if you're a Christian and if you love each other and blah blah blah. I found it's just the opposite. In fact, in marriage, they say opposites attract, but after marriage, opposites attack.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, the conflict happens. So if you're having some relational conflict at home, here's what I would say: it's very normal. And so, the health of a relationship is not the absence of conflict, is how you handle conflict. And so I think that that's the important thing. So I want to look at...
So glad you said that.
I think that that's the big deal because I think... I was insecure in our marriage, and I know that I felt like that because we're having conflict, it must be all wrong, all bad, and you just want to get out of it. That's actually not the issue.
I remember Pastor Gordon said the thing that normally draws you to your spouse, that you're most attracted to, is the thing that's going to rub you when you get married. And a lot of times you see opposites do kind of attract, as a balance. But then when you get in a marriage, you're like, why don't they think like this? Or why don't they act like this? And then that's the actual thing that drew you to that person, was that. So sometimes that happens, and
It's a real issue for so many people, and that's why I'm glad we're talking about it today.
Well, I think it's going to happen. It's going to happen during Christmas. So let me point out what Peter, and I didn't point out, Peter did. Let's look at these attitudes that can maybe diffuse a conflict. Here's the first one, sympathy. That's the first attitude. Being sympathetic. I think it's weird that he actually used this word, sympathy, in relation to conflict in a relationship. But when you dive into this word a little deeper, you find it's not. It's actually apropos, because here's the reality. The way I'm wired as kind of a high type A, high DI on the DISC scale. If you do the spiritual gifts, I'm a prophet, which means prophets just say, y'all gonna die, no one cares, go away. I mean, prophets are just wired different. They're kind of cold.
That doesn't cause any conflict.
It causes no conflict. But when you say sympathy, be sympathetic to a prophet, the thing is, that's hard. That's a wake-up call. Peter was wired high DI.
He's brash.
He was brash. He was always, putting his foot in his mouth. He was the guy who, wanted to, call down fire on people. I mean, he had an anger issue in his early days. And I think it's cool that in this letter, when he's much, much older, that he's saying, guys, start here. Start with being sympathetic. And the reason that I think sympathy is so important is that it actually meets the two deepest human needs. I need to be understood and I need to be validated. And I think that that's a thing that when we hit conflict, we don't realize that often we actually violate those. We're violating the validation, so it's a violation of validation. It's the idea of they want to be heard, I want to be understood, and I want someone to be able to hear genuinely what I'm feeling.
It's not a default mode for us to go to sympathy when someone's, I'm conflicting and I'm arguing or I'm, battling with somebody. That's not what I default to by any means.
Well, it's kind of funny. It's like two selfish people saying, well, you don't understand. And then I go, well, you don't understand. And so we're just both yelling at each other trying to say, you need to understand, when he's saying take a step back and be understanding in order to understand. So how can we meet those deepest needs? And here's what I would say. It's doing what you don't want to do. It's listening. Listening is the number one way that we validate someone's feelings. It's actually, in fact, it's hard for a DI because I like to load, not listen. So in other words, while you're talking, I'm going, and I'm just waiting for you to shut up so I can fire. Because I'm thinking of like, well, what you just said with that's wrong, and that's wrong, and that's wrong, and if you'll draw a breath, bang, I'm just going to knock you out. Because and true listening skill. Here's how you know if you're really listening to someone. Can you repeat back what they've just said?
Yeah. Yeah, one of the things that you had me thinking about when you were just saying that, load, not to even, rebuttal or come back at them, but I try to fix sometimes. And so I'm not even listening. I just hear the initial issue, and I know I've done this, especially with my family quite a bit, and I'm like, oh, well, you should say this, or you should do this, or you should do that, when they just wanted to unload it and have you hear them. You didn't need to fix it. And so I know my wife's told me that now. She goes, I don't need you to fix this, but can I share something with you? And I'm like, I'm so glad that we've learned each other to where she can say that now, because it helps me to actually listen rather than fix.
There's some truth to that stuff in the Bible, that there are helpers. They really help us.
The helpmaid thing.
Yeah.
But that's a big deal, and I do think with men particularly, and it's not, it could be as with a woman as well. But with men, I think our default mode is to try to fix instead of actually listen. And the truth is, listening is the most loving thing that we can do. James 1:19 says, every one of us should be quick to listen, slow to speak, slow to become angry. So let me ask you a question. I'm going to throw this out to you two guys. What does he mean, quick to listen? You ever wonder? Quick to listen. It's a great verse to quote, but what the heck does it mean?
Yeah. Well, doesn't it mean, make sure that is your first thing to do. Don't speak first, because the second is slow to speak. Yeah. So it's just like, when I read it, it's like, shut up and just listen, I want that to be my default. Like when I'm engaging with my wife or with someone, especially if they're going through a tough time or there's conflict with us, I want that to be my default. Hey, go to that quickly, because what I have a tendency to go to quickly is, well, let me tell you why you're wrong, or let me fix it, like you said, go to fix it mode real quick. So at least that's what I think
that's great. You made me think of, we just saw Ford versus Ferrari, which was a fantastic movie.
Love it.
And I thought of this actually in car terms. Hit the acceleration on listening and the brakes on speaking.
That's
good. So be faster at listening, but put the brakes on talking. And what's kind of cool is that by putting the brakes on talking and accelerating on listening, you actually will slow down the anger factor. So this is a tough verse. Wouldn't you agree? It's hard.
Yeah.
It's easy to say, hard to do, but we have to keep remembering. I took a Stephen Covey course many, many years ago, and habit number 5, if you ever read his book, The 7 Habits of Success, habit number 5 is seek first to understand rather than to be understood. And I think that's probably one of the most powerful relational principles. Seek first to understand. And how can I understand? You have to listen to what the person's saying. I think the test is, whether I'm listening, the test is, could you say back to them? Now, here's what's funny. Yeah. I used to think, because somebody told me that years ago, well, if you can repeat it back, then you're doing these good listening, reflective listening skills. So what I thought was funny is that I thought I was listening because I could repeat back their words. I would repeat back what Lisa said, and she'd go, no, that's not what I said at all. What I found was listening goes 2 levels deeper. It goes into listening means, have you really unwrangled what she's trying to say,
Yeah.
not just what you think she said. That's an art.
You talked about your wiring earlier. It's almost listening through their lens, how they're wired. Because sometimes the words that we receive that they're using is still through our lens, and it's not really actually what they're even saying.
Yeah, what's the meaning behind the message?
Yeah.
Right. Like what's really,
Yeah.
you know. So the other thing I love that when I realized that when like James is saying this, it's because the people that were reading it then were struggling with this. And that always helps me too, that like, wow, I'm not the only one. There's actually people in the Bible that struggled with this as well, and that's what he was addressing,
I think that if I'm going to be really honest, in our earliest years, and one of my greatest weaknesses and faults that was the most hurtful in our relationship is that she would say something that's expressing a feeling, and I would say, and I wish this wasn't true, but it is true. I would say, "That's dumb," or "That's stupid," or "That's not true."
Yeah, that probably didn't work out well.
Yeah,
for
that
you.
didn't work out
Did
very
that
well. Yeah, that did not work out. But
You woke up 2 hours later off the floor.
I could see just a little bit the first day.
Knowing
Maybe a
how
little more the next day,
knowing
yeah.
how you're wired, I know why you said that, and I know the spirit behind why you said that was not how it was received.
Now, why is that?
You were saying that because you were trying to speak confidence into her to say, that's irrational thinking. You're better than that, or that's not accurate, or whatever like that, for her to receive that and own it herself. However, how she's wired, she's not going to get there. That's through your lens.
Yeah.
And I think that, part of that is true. I'm wired to be logical. So if you say A plus B equals D, I'm going to go, no, it's C. And so if you say something irrational,
Yeah.
then I go into corrective mode. Listen, when people are upset and they're mad, they're going to say crazy stuff.
Yeah.
Would you agree?
Yeah.
Stuff they didn't even mean or stuff that isn't even true. And here's what Paul says in Romans 15. We have to bear the burden of being considerate of the doubts and fears of others. Here's what I learned in our marriage. That number one in sympathy is that I have to be considerate. I have to bear burdens. But notice he says doubts and fears. Here's what I've discovered. When someone says something irrational, the root cause of it is fear. Now this is important that you understand this. What's the fear? The fear is often related to something, a pain of the past, and they're terrified it's happening again.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And so they say this irrational thing, and you're going, that's not even what I said or I did. And actually, there's some replay of tapes happening, and you touched a core fear. And that person may say something that seems irrational, and at that moment, what they need is sympathy. They just need some sympathy. So I gave some scores on this when I was writing it down, and I gave
I like
a 1 as the worst score, and a 9 as the best score. Where do you rate yourself on the sympathy factor? Where would you say?
Tim, why don't you go first?
I think you would score pretty high.
Yeah.
I think he would score pretty darn high.
I'm more emotive. One of the things I was going to say is you've helped me understand what's the story behind the strangeness. So a lot of times the way we respond to someone is the surface issue. So there's probably something deeper going on underneath there that they've never really come to terms with. The older we get, the more self-aware we are, and the more we realize when we act irrational, where is that coming from in the past? And I had a good friend that kind of helped me understand that. And so I've even started analyzing, like, there's been times to where I've reacted in ways, and, then reflecting back, I'm like, why did I get so upset over that? And I realized they hit a core fear that happened, decades ago that I've never really kind of resolved or kind of wrestled to the ground.
I don't know what Heather would say. I think I score high on this. I think you
do.
Yeah, I think I'm probably in the 7 range, and but it's from learning, because she said to me just that same scenario that you were talking about with Lisa. She would tell me. She said, "Don't tell me how to feel.
Yeah.
When I need you to listen, don't tell me how to feel." And so I think from her help and that I've gotten better. I think I'm about a 7. I think it'd be a great thing for
That's
people that are
pretty darn
watching
good,
to be
yeah.
able to.
Yeah,
to
rate
kinda go
yourself
through- yeah.
reflectively. I know that with years of training by Lisa and lots of therapy and counseling and scripture reading and prayer, I've moved to a 2. So I'm
It's a solid 2, though.
It's a solid. You're going toward, like if we were, the arrow is green and going up. Okay.
it's moving in the right direction. Here's the second thing Peter hit on it, and he said, have brotherly love for one another. I use the word loyalty. The Greek word for brotherly love really has to do with this idea, a sense of camaraderie and a sense of I'm for you and I'm fighting with you, not against you. I'm for you and I'm fighting with you, not against you. And here's what I know. Loyalty calls us to be bridge builders, not bridge blowers.
Ooh,
And
like that.
and I know that in the heat of the moment, so often I'm tempted to blow the bridge relationally. And I think we see this a lot in social media now. I mentioned recently on social media that a lot of these memes about, you got to get rid of all the toxic people in your life are actually just a smokescreen for saying, I don't want to be
Yeah.
a loving person. I mean, how convenient if I could write off every person in the whole world who ever offends me.
Yeah.
Well, that's going to be a pretty lonely world.
It would be. I mean, you're right. I see that, and I often think that there'll be people that just say, hey, if those toxic people in your life, get rid of them. Well, I mean, sometimes they're family. And if you just did that, then who's there for them, as well. And I just don't think that's always the answer, to write people off.
Well, and you certainly can't be a Christian
Hello.
because Christ, you can't be a Christian and write people off because Christ actually is the person who says, I came to reconcile. So you can't say, I'm a Christian, but I write people off. It doesn't work that way. Loyalty means I won't give up on you.
Yeah, because Jesus never gave up. There's a tendency for people to think, well, Jesus walked away from the Pharisees, the religious people.
Yeah.
He didn't ever give up on them. They just weren't willing to listen to what he had to say, right?
The sign of giving up on someone is when you stop saying anything.
Yeah.
And Jesus did not stop saying stuff to the Pharisees.
Yeah.
He gave corrective words, but he gave words of truth. But there were Pharisees who then, from those conversations, came and sought him out. Nicodemus was one of those guys.
Right. Because he continued the conversation, because he
Yeah.
didn't give up on it.
Yeah.
Well, even on the cross, though, right? Father, forgive them. They know not what they do.
The ultimate bridge builder. Look at this in
Yeah.
1 Corinthians 13:7 says, if you love someone, you will be loyal to him no matter what the cost.
Wow.
Whoa. That's pretty powerful. 1 Corinthians 13, we often read at the weddings, and I think that this is one of those that we probably ought to put on the wall somewhere because real love, and that word love is agape, real love says to be like God and to actually say, I'm not going to walk out on you and I'm not going to give up on you. I may not like you and I may get hurt by you or offended by you, and it doesn't mean we don't set boundaries.
Right.
And it doesn't mean that you don't have ways of connecting or relating to a person that helps that person to be healthier in the response. That's not so. Giving up on somebody is totally different. It's where you walk away from them. You walk out on them. Yeah. And I just think that as Christians, we're commanded to never blow the bridge. I just think that that's true.
Yeah, and don't you think it's so hard even for us as Christians because we just don't live in a world that's loyal anymore. We live in an unfriend me society. You don't say anything I like, I unfriend you, and so it's so.
Well, I don't want you to know I unfriended you, so I unfollow you.
Or snooze you for 30 days. Because I'm not willing to not be loyal with you, but I'm gonna snooze you for 30 days.
I want to look good about it. Yeah.
If you change, then I'll continue my loyalty. But if not, and I think that's the loyalty is tied to sometimes are you loyal to me and what I want. And that's not. I don't think that's true loyalty, is it?
No. Yeah, I think here's what I would say: the test of loyalty is simply this: will you continue to love them, even if they don't change?
Yeah, yeah.
Wow.
Will I still love them if they don't change? If they don't act? So that issue that bothers me about that person, what if it never resolves? what if they always chew their ice and it sounds, you know, you're like, can I do this for 37 years?
The noisy chewers. Yeah.
What if
Yeah.
they swallow for the rest of their life?
Oh, yeah.
You know, and they make in other words, and I'm being silly, but
Yeah.
there's issues. Here's the reality. We all have, you know, even though I was saved from sin, I still carry the scars of sin. And that means I have character flaws that I will struggle with until I die. Now, that I'm not going to reach perfection on this planet. I'm still going to have some weaknesses and some flaws, and those are going to cause me to react in ways that I don't want to. I recently saw that movie, The Mr. Rogers. Did you? I don't know if you guys saw it.
I thought you were supposed to take
watched that.
me.
I
You're not
wanted
being
to
loyalty
take you.
to me.
I wanted to take you, but I did. I wanted to make sure first it was
Appropriate?
Yeah, exactly. It's like,
Wow.
Brian and Brian are
Stepping out on a limb there, man, with Mr. Rogers. Wow. A little risque
Where was
there.
I going with that, Mr. Rogers?
I don't know. Won't you be my neighbor, though?
Oh, I remember because the journalist is doing a story on his life, and he asked the wife, "Is this guy the real deal?"
Yeah.
And she goes, "Oh my gosh, he gets angry. He has issues." She says, "In fact, in her early years, he had so much anger, you know, it was really threatening our marriage. But he has
Wow.
learned these disciplines in his life that helps him to keep that at bay." I think the reality is we all have those demons underneath that. I'm not talking about real spiritual. I'm talking about the flaws
Can't
of our
have
sin nature that we do have to develop disciplines to keep at bay.
Yeah.
Yeah, get it out of alignment. One of the things I was thinking with loyalty is also unity, and sometimes I have this misconception in my head that unity is just always this harmony and we all get along and that sort of thing, but the most healthiest relationships is not absent of conflict or disagreement, but loyalty, like what you were saying, is I accept you even if you were not to change. But you have to have healthy boundaries. One of the questions that came in today, you were talking about family, and it had to deal with family, and it says, I have a toxic family member who constantly causes trouble and turmoil. I've forgiven this person several times, but I no longer keep up a relationship with them. Am I wrong for not wanting to communicate or be around this person? I've tried several occasions to help them biblically, only to have them blow up and use that ammunition against me. I mean, and so
That's a great question. Number one, I would say every family has a toxic member. Number one. Everybody does. Everybody has the weird uncle, or the sister or the brother or somebody that you might label as toxic. And it obviously it's to different degrees. But here's what I would say: when I said don't blow the bridge, I didn't say keep crossing the bridge.
Oh, that's good.
Blowing the bridge says I will always have room for you in my life if you want to have a healthy relationship with me. That's different than when you blow the bridge, you say, I will never, ever consider that. And I think that's important to recognize the distinctive of those two things. They're very different. And for me, it's keeping that open pathway to the person. It doesn't mean I'm actively putting myself constantly in a position of being wounded and hurt. That's not healthy either. So the book, again, boundaries, it just cannot be overemphasized there.
That's
Any
great.
thoughts on that?
No, I'm just glad you just kind of broke that down, because people could think I'm not being loyal if I don't keep crossing that bridge, or and so I thought that was good.
He says in Romans 15, accept one another as Christ has accepted you. So that just simply says that no matter how much we strive, there's still going to be stuff that irritates us and rubs us wrong, and we have to come to a point of saying, I just have to accept you for who you are. Acceptance means I acknowledge your flaws, but I'm not going to break off relations. So how do you think you do on this loyalty factor? Rate yourself there. 1 is the worst, 9 is the best. What do you think there?
I'm a pretty loyal guy, so I'm an 8.
You're an 8. Wow.
I think I'm
Solid 8?
I think I'm a solid 8.
Okay.
I think people that are watching, I haven't talked to in a long time, but no, I mean I strive for loyalty. It's important to me. It's when I'm in, and.
How you feeling there?
Well, I thought I was a little high until you said you accept them even if they don't change, and that's why I was thinking about that unity factor, because that's like one of my core values. I really do feel like I'm a loyal person, but man, I still have work to do. on never blowing a bridge, accepting someone, creating healthy boundaries. So I'll go slightly lower than you, and I'll go with 7, Brian.
You're so
Just
humble.
just to
You're so
keep
humble.
that humility.
Wow.
You know.
You know, I pride myself on humility.
Yeah, that's right. I see that pride. I would probably rate myself at about an 8.78. And here's the weirdest thing of all.
8.78.
I'm an engineer. I had to break out
I had to
something.
be specific.
Here's what's so weird about who I am. I'm the prophet who is this, that can easily come across as this cold, but I'm also this baby when it comes to restoring relationships.
Yeah.
I absolutely blowing the bridge is not really something with me. It's pretty hard. It would be very difficult. And even in the worst case scenario, I can't think of a single person on the planet, even today, that I would not warmly welcome and receive if that person wanted to restore. I just don't feel that.
Yeah.
So it's not an issue that I struggle with. But I do know a lot of folks struggle with that, of holding on to grudges and resentment and festering it.
Oh, yeah.
And it's not really who I am. That's not really my nature. So some of you, that's your sin flaw area that you struggle with.
Yeah.
All right, here's the third one. Generosity. He said, be compassionate. And I know you might think of generosity. Why is that? Why is the word generosity a character quality here? Let me tell you why. Because when he said be compassionate, he uses the word that is often translated also for grace. It's this free, flowing, continual grace. Somebody defined as God's riches at Christ's expense. Another way of defining it is God giving me what I don't deserve. He's just flowing out his love and grace. And here's what I know. Conflict causes hoarding. Here's what happens. When you get in a conflict, you get mad at somebody, you want to withhold what they need the most.
Yeah.
You don't want to give them love. You don't want to give grace. You don't want to give them anything because you feel like, why should I give them? They don't deserve it. And so you do the opposite of generosity. You do withholding. And generosity and compassion requires giving
Yeah.
what the person needs, not what they deserve.
Yeah, I think of the time, you get a little extra cash in your pocket and you're coming home and you can't wait to tell your wife, and then, she just starts arguing with you and you're like, oh, yeah, never mind.
Yeah.
Right?
We won't
To
bring
your
that up.
point, you're right. It's like, it causes hoarding, because it's like, you know what, fine.
Yeah.
I'm not going to do that. Yeah.
I'm going to pull
I
back
don't
on
do that, honey, but
Of course not. So what do they need the most? Look at this in Ephesians 4:29. Speak only what's helpful for building others up according to their needs, that it may benefit those who listen. And if I were preaching or messaging, I had notes, I'd say circle, speak, because words, people need this. We don't think about the power of the tongue in our words, but the question I would ask is, what are the words that you feel like the people in your family need to hear? What are the words that they most need to hear? And why is it my sin nature, especially if you're a parent, when you're a parent with kids, you hoard, I don't know why that is, but you hoard stuff that they probably need to hear, but somehow in your parenting mind, you're like, no, they'll quit trying hard and they'll quit doing this, and what they need to know is buck it up, son.
Yeah.
And we hoard stuff when they really do need our words. So what do you think are some words that family members need to hear?
I think you're loved.
Yeah.
I think my kids need to hear that I'm proud of them,
Yeah.
for what they're doing, because life's hard. And when our kids do good things, we should reward them with good words on that and pause to take a moment to say, hey, I just got to tell you, that was pretty awesome that you did that, I think our kids need to hear that. People need to hear that.
Yeah.
I went to money when you said that. You're right, and I have to think about, am I hoarding words, and I think I am at times with those closest to me, because it's in this tendency to be a disciplinarian more than it is just dad, and and man, sometimes our kids just need to be encouraged with words of encouragement.
Yeah.
Yeah.
helps when you know their love language. I know my daughter is definitely words of encouragement and just trying to find those opportunities. She's in school now to just say, man, I'm proud of you. I'm proud of the path you're on. And even my son, just taking those moments to really just be able to speak life into him. And if you don't use those words, or, I think you went right to money. And, third base, there, class 301, we talk about time and treasure. Time is one of them too. So just spending time, carving out time, and really being generous with our time for the other person as well means a lot.
Well, it's like you said earlier with fear. I know with me, there's this looming fear in the back that if I encourage my kids too much, they'll get kind of loose.
Yeah.
And they'll start, they won't be, responsible. And what a lie,
Yeah.
I mean, it's like, you talk about, pastoring instead of policing. I love that. It was one of the first things you said when I came here. You got to make the decision. Do you want to pastor people or police people? And I think the same is true for our families and our friends. Am I policing people or or encouraging them?
So being generous with our words, but not just our words, but also our actions. So 1 John 3:18 says this: we should love people not just with words and talk,
Darn it.
but also by our
I gotta do
actions
something.
and real caring. How many of us know that your actions can wipe out your words? I mean, you can say the right thing, but if you don't also do the right thing, then it becomes meaningless. So compassion and generosity is both. It's the both and. So how do you rate yourself on this? On being generous with your words when you're now here's the correct and when you're upset and mad. How is that generosity factor? Where do you rate yourself? 1 is you're a schmuck. 9 is you're the most wonderful, compassionate.
You had to go and say, even when you're upset, man, you always balance it out at the end for me, because I'm kind of a words of encouragement kind of guy, but I know that when I get upset, it really is hard to do sometimes. So.
I know when Lisa and I, especially when we were first married, and we'd have an argument or something, I would get mad, and we'd go to bed. I was like, am I going to say I love you?
Yeah, who's going to be the first person to say it,
Who's going to say that?
I think I would, and listen, if you're watching this, feel free to pause this so that you can talk through with whoever you're with, on this. But I think I would, when you said about actions, I'm going to rate myself as it relates to actions. And that one, I don't think I fare as well as I need to. I think I'm going to do you. I'm a 4.9 based on actions, because what comes natural is the words.
Yeah.
But then is there that action behind it? And that's why, when you read that verse, I was like, and sometimes you do that, real quick, but there's no substance behind it, and I think I definitely could improve in that area.
You made me think when you said pause it. I mean, if you're watching this podcast with maybe your small group or spouse or children, it may be cool for you to rate yourself and then rate the other person and maybe compare, because
And then
sometimes
have a fight.
yeah.
Remember the first 2 points so that you don't
Because we
argue.
want you to
You're
work on
one.
this stuff. So yeah, you could have that argument right after that.
7, you're out of your mind.
What I've often found is that we rate ourselves lower than what someone else will give us. We're just critical by nature to ourselves.
Heather's been texting me the whole time. She said, "Babe, you need to take it down 2 percentage
Yeah.
points."
Yeah, okay.
I say I'm about a 5 on this one. I am quicker with the words than the actions, but I think, sometimes you do the actions, even though I don't feel like doing this for that person, but I learned a long time ago, it's easier to act your way to a feeling than feel your way to an action.
Say that again.
It's easier to act your way towards a feeling than feel your way to an action.
That's
In other
good.
words, if you wait to feel like doing something for someone,
You're not gonna do it.
you're not going to do it. But if you start doing for that person, it often helps to generate the feelings. Feelings follow actions, not verse versa.
Gotcha.
Okay.
That makes sense?
Well, it's a mindset, right?
You just start doing it,
Yeah.
even though I don't feel it,
Yeah.
but it helps to soften my heart towards that person.
Yeah.
All right, number 4, here's the 4th one. He said, be humble. Not like Peter saying this, humility. That was obviously a struggle with him, but he recognized how important it is relationally for all of us. And here's what I know. Humility is a choice. It's actually given as a command, so it's in the tense in the Bible as being something he orders us to do. So it's not just like a temperament. It's not like a person who's like all low on themselves and, oh, I'm very humble and I'm very, it's actually something you have to, you put into action. You do humility. So what does it mean? Humility is putting others' needs before my own. It's literally saying that person is more deserving than I am. Which is the absolute opposite of everything you think and feel when you're in a conflict. I deserve to be treated better. I have a right to this. I have done. So we amplify those things when we're feeling. So humility, it says, bring it down. So here's the key. Jesus says, how I see myself is how I will actually respond. Jesus said in Matthew 20, even the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve, to give his life as a ransom for others. And so I would say that placing a servant mindset brings us into a position to actually reduce conflict. The test of whether or not you have an attitude of a servant is how you act when someone treats you like one. So how do I respond? I deserve better. Well, if you're really feeling that, then you're not in the position that Jesus was in as a servant. So what is it that prevents us from having an attitude of serving? It's pride. Look at this.
Word.
Yeah, it's the P word. I gotta go to the bathroom now. Look at Proverbs 13:10. It says, "Pride leads to arguments." And here's what I've discovered, and this is so important. Pride might not start the argument, but it always sustains it.
It's the fuel.
Yep.
Yeah.
At some point, someone has to make a conscious choice to cry uncle and say, it's got to stop.
Yeah.
And it's pride that keeps the argument going and going and going. So I have to deal with my pride. So how do I do that? I have to acknowledge the fact that I have a pride issue, and I have to admit where I was wrong. If you're in a conflict and you can't find a single thing you said or did wrong, you ain't worked through it yet. You just have not worked through it yet. And if you dissect that and go, no, that person is 100% wrong and has created all of this conflict, well, you ain't processed it enough.
Yeah.
So you haven't looked at yourself. Proverbs 28 says, a man who refuses to admit mistakes can never be successful. But if he will confess them and forsake them, he'll get a fresh chance. So how do you rate yourself on the humility factor? How are you guys feeling on this one?
Go ahead, Brian. I'm gonna go one more up then.
No, you go.
Whatever you say.
I think I'm in that probably 5 or 6, range. Hey, unpack. What's the difference between false humility and humility? I mean, other than the obvious word, but help.
That's a good one.
False humility. I think both of those is an attitude of the heart. What's really happened inside of you?
Yeah.
Because no one can measure that one.
Right.
So I can fake false humility, but not before God.
Yeah.
I mean, He
So
knows
it's an internal.
It's an internal.
Yeah.
I think it's what's real.
Yeah. It's not
Attitudinally.
real humility is not put on, right?
Right.
You're not trying to fake it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think. Again, this doesn't feel right to answer this one. To be humble.
So what's your humble response to
my
your
humble
humility?
response is
So the
I'll be in the
lower
middle.
we go, does that mean we're more
You're-
humble?
That's
Yeah,
the false.
it's
I
better.
think
It's
if you
better.
do one, then you're being.
It's like golf. I'm gonna go with
humility.
one, and
All right, let's
go, move
let's
on.
hurry it up.
All right, sorry.
What's your rating?
I'm gonna go with 5.
You're gonna go
6.
Yeah.
You're a 6.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm at a 10. So I didn't know.
That's not even
Negative
on here.
10?
Okay.
Negative 10.
All right.
Yeah.
Come on,
I'm so great that I'm humble. I would say I'm about a 5. I would go a 5. Okay, sympathy, loyalty, generosity, and here's number 5, mercy. Mercy. Don't repay evil. I promise you this one's going to come into play this holiday season. There's going to be an opportunity where someone does something and you want to respond immediately in kind. the way that person did. So let me give you a definition of mercy. Mercy is giving more kindness than justice demands. Mercy is giving to someone more kindness than justice demands. When you think that they deserve something, mercy is when you withhold. Look at this in verse 9 again. Don't repay evil for evil. Instead, pay back with a blessing. The New Living says. This is what God calls you to do. And I would say that's probably the hardest thing you can possibly do. In fact, you can do it with pride. You know, you can try to one-up them, you know. They're a jerk, and I'm going to be all Christian-y, you know. So I'm going to do something sweet, you know. I bless you, you know, in the midst of that. And it's
burning coals of fire.
That's right. That's right.
Oh, man.
I had a friend in the past, they said that they would recall on that verse. You know, they were like, I just treated them kindly.
Kill 'em with
because
kindness.
it's like coals on their head. I just kept thinking that in my mind. It's like coals.
I'm watching their
yeah.
So I guess that's.
But they were being kind.
It's
but
only
maybe
a
it was
blessing
like,
if it's a blessing to them.
Yeah.
Let's say so. You know, that's instinctively is. I think it's training our sinful nature to not be in control. It's saying, nope, I'm not going to allow that. I'm going to show mercy and give mercy back. Look at this in Colossians 3. He says, be gentle, be ready to forgive, and never hold grudges. Remember, God forgave you, and that was pretty hard. So you have to forgive others. So it's non-conditional. Listen, Christianity is all about these three things: unconditional, undeserved, and unreasonable love. Unconditional. It's not, I love you if. Undeserved. I know you don't deserve it, but I love you. And unreasonable means it doesn't make sense in the eyes of the world to give this back to this person.
So you mentioned when you first came on staff something he said. One of the first things you said to me when I came on staff is the Christian life is a life of being taken advantage of. In other words, you can't.
Wait, did I say that?
Yeah, you did. It was pretty profound, though.
We share that, right?
It was pretty profound because I mean that's one of the things I have to remind myself. It's like, you know, someone may treat you badly, but I mean that's what the Christian life is you know, showing grace, showing mercy, making allowances for the other person, and it's hard because we naturally do not want to lean in that direction.
I love what you said today. You said Jesus came to settle the fight. And as Christians, we have to settle the fight with people. I mean, we have to forgive, you know. And if Jesus came to settle the fight, why would we not do that? And
especially in this season, and you hit on it today, I find when there's more external pressures around me, I'm less likely to do that in those situations. And those are those God appointments where, you know, somehow that's been orchestrated where I need to show that grace and love, and everything else on how I'm feeling at the time, I don't naturally lean into that.
So how are you rating yourself on this one? On mercy, repaying back a blessing for evil. How would you rate yourself on that?
I'll go 5.
I don't really like this.
We're going to start hitting fives now. That's what
Yeah, man,
As we've gone
I'm going
down, I feel worse
downhill.
about myself.
Yeah, why couldn't you flip the script here? I mean, man, I would
the
have.
conflict that happens with you.
I'd rather have be up and to the right.
Yeah.
Start out the gate well. Man.
I think I'm about a 6. I tend to want to do this. It's more typical. I'm a person that cannot allow relational tension to lie. Some people, they can literally carry on a conflict relationally with another person in their family, and they can live that way for years. I can live that way for milliseconds, and I'm like, this needs resolution. In fact, I push so hard for resolution that I've had to learn that Lisa's temperament is I need a little bit of time and space, and then I'm ready.
Yeah.
But if you try to push in on resolution too soon, then I'm actually creating greater conflicts. I say sometimes just backing off is giving, you know, a help for someone. Backing away a little bit, giving some space, and letting them have a little room to breathe. So let's finish it up. The last one, let's take it home, is this is the hardest one, is maturity. He says, you got to control your tongue. You've got to control your tongue. Here's the fact. Most relationship conflict is a result of immaturity. Period. It's because someone is being immature. And here, I got news for you. If everywhere you go in your life, you discover jerks, it's probably you. if there's jerks at work and jerks at the store and a jerk in the parking lot and a jerk at church and a jerk, it's probably you.
Yeah.
Maybe
You're the constant.
You made me think. You made me
constant
think
in this?
earlier when you were talking about toxic people, removing toxic people from your life, and I'm like, they're going to always find toxic people because most likely they're that individual that
Yeah, they're
has
carrying
not-
the bottle of
Yeah,
toxicity
that's
with
right.
them, pouring it out. And so
That's right.
maturity is the
Yeah.
ultimate. And the ultimate sign of maturity is if you're able to shut your mouth.
Oh, yeah.
Look what he says in 10 and 11. He says, you want a happy, good life? Keep control of your tongue and guard your lips. James 3 says the same thing, man. The tongue is a fire, and that fire burns through a lot of households, and sometimes the greatest thing you could do during this holiday is just to shut your mouth and don't retort, don't respond. Don't try to, burn somebody, or, if you're like me, come up with that perfect sarcastic quip, maybe that even rhymes. I don't know, something like that. But keep it to yourself.
Yeah.
Proverbs 12 says, thoughtless words can wound as deeply as any sword, but wisely spoken words can heal. The power of the tongue. Let me share with you a poem. I don't do a lot of poems. Let me share with you this poem. If your lips you would keep from slips, 5 things observe with care, to whom you speak, of whom you speak, and how and when and where. So the power of the tongue. Wow. Maturity ultimately defines. So here's my encouragement to you. If you've been watching this, I would encourage you. This is a great podcast episode. I do a lot of my podcasts on the treadmill, take it a piece at a time. Yeah. I'll take a podcast that's maybe an hour long, and I'll break it up into 20-minute segments and do that in that setting. But I would encourage you to go over this because these principles are too important to just fly by and say, well, it's not a big deal. These issues really hit where we live, relationally, in our home, and conflicts. I hope you don't have any conflict this holiday season, but most likely you will. And when you do, I encourage you, turn back to 1 Peter chapter 3, take a moment, think through these diffusing attitudes and recognize that you always hold the power to stop a conflict. It's always in your hands. You have that ability. It doesn't have to go on. All right, guys, thank you so much for joining us in this special episode of The Green Room. I want to thank Pastor Tim, Pastor Brian for helping me out with this teaching, and I hope it's been a blessing to you. We'll see you next time.
See you guys.